Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Caine are holding a briefing on Iran from the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Let's listen in.
They were obsessed with it, and they never got even close. Every single one of those shots easily shot down miles and miles away from the Abe Lincoln. They were blowing ammo into Fantasyland. Contrast that with, most significantly, in last night's wave of more than 800 strikes, we finished completely destroying Iran's defense industrial base, a core pillar of our mission objective. What little they have left buried in bunkers is all they will have. They can still shoot, we know that. Their command and control is so decimated they can't really talk and coordinate, so they still may shoot here and there, but that would be very, very unwise. But they can no longer build missiles, build rockets, build launchers, or build UAVs. Their factories have been razed to the ground, set back in historic fashion. You see, had Iran refused our terms, the next targets would have been their power plants, their bridges, and oil and energy infrastructure, targets they could not defend and could not realistically rebuild. It would have taken them decades, and we were locked and loaded. They couldn't defend against it. President Trump had the power to cripple Iran's entire economy in minutes, but he chose mercy. He spared those targets because Iran accepted the ceasefire under overwhelming pressure. The new Iranian regime understood that a deal was far better than the fate that awaited them. This new regime just happened to look at what happened to their predecessors. Their top leadership was systematically eliminated. The previous Iranian supreme leader, dead. The Supreme National Security Council Secretary, dead. The Supreme Leader Office Advisor, dead. The Supreme Leader Military Office Chief, dead. The Defense Minister, no longer with us. The IRGC Commander, dead. The Armed Forces General Staff Commander, dead. The Intelligence Minister, dead. The IRGC Navy Commander, no longer here. The IRGC Intel Chief, dead. I skipped over a bunch, and I could go on and on and on, to include the new so-called new Supreme Leader wounded and disfigured. This new regime was out of options and out of time, so they cut a deal. They know this agreement means that they will never, ever possess a nuclear weapon. Under the terms, any nuclear material they should have will be removed. Any material,
and you're listening to U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, which will come on later on, addressing the press. Meanwhile, Jagruti Dave, who's covering this story for CNA, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Now, Jagruti, what has Washington's position been regarding the ceasefire?
Well, as you heard there, Angela, from Pete Hegseth, Washington is characterizing this as an overwhelming success for the United States, saying that Iran bent to overwhelming pressure, claiming Iran was begging for a ceasefire, that calling this a devastating military defeat, and that they're characterizing this also as regime change, saying that this new regime, as Pete Hegseth put it, looked at the fate of their predecessors and decided it was better to make a deal. President Trump has also posted on Truth Social some more details about his expectations for what this ceasefire will look like and what the future holds for Iran. He said that, again, claiming that Iran has gone through a regime change, claiming that there will be no enrichment of uranium and that the U.S. is working with Iran to dig up the uranium that was buried in last year's U.S. strikes. They're going to be talking about sanctions and tariff reliefs with Iran, and he claims that many of the 15 points in the US's 15-point plan that was sent to Iran have been agreed to. He later said that any country supplying military weapons to Iran will be immediately tariffed on any and all goods sold to the United States of America, 50% effective immediately. So This is the way the president is characterizing it. It must be remembered that the issue of uranium enrichment, this idea that Iran has agreed to no enrichment of uranium, this was in fact a red line for Iran during negotiations. It was something that they would really not be moved on. And also this 15-point plan, Iran has previously publicly rejected that 15-point plan. So now here we have the United States saying that those previous rejections by Iran are now part of this agreement process. We also understand from the president going forward that the US is going to be helping in the Strait of Hormuz, and that the US has basically got a definitive agreement concerning a long-term peace with Iran and long-term peace in the Middle East. So he's characterizing this as the template for future peace in the region.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the NATO chief Mark Rutte is set to hold talks with President Trump later on. What can we expect to come out of those talks?
This is going to be a very interesting meeting between Mark Rutte and President Donald Trump. Mark Rutte is known as the Trump whisperer in Europe because he has a good relationship with Donald Trump. But some who characterize this as a very effective way of getting the president's ear. Others say that perhaps Mark Rutte is a bit too submissive, that maybe his strong support for attacks on Iran gave Donald Trump a false sense that NATO allies would then rush in and support, give full-throated support to the president. So in that context, it's going to be a very interesting talk. It's likely that Mark Rutte is going to want to talk to Donald Trump about the comments that Trump has made, calling NATO a coward, a paper tiger, and threatening to withdraw from the alliance. And Donald Trump is likely going to want to understand how much NATO is going to help in the steps going forward to achieve this peace that Donald Trump is proposing for the Middle East.
Jagruti, thank you so much for that report. That was Jagruti Dave covering this story for CNA from Washington, D.C.